Are you tired of sleeping in caves and trees? Are you tired of the big bad wolf blowing away your straw and stick houses? Well, I have a solution. Introducing bricks. They're carefully crafted with the most advanced technology at the time, sticks and mud. This cutting-edge technology has taken thousands of years to master and was developed by the Assyrians in 19,000 BCE.
Whoa, it's a ziggurat!
Okay, bricks were made from mud, sand, and water, and were mixed with straw and binding materials. The first type of brick used was adobe, which was first used in Syria around 19,000 BCE. Adobe was typically made from thick mud with small amounts of clay integrated in the mud mixture. Then, straw was added to provide extra strength. The mixture was placed and compressed in rectangular molds and left to dry out in the sun. Adobe bricks were adopted by the Arabs, incorporated in the buildings and mosques, like the Great Mosque of Timbuktu. Bricks allowed architects to build larger and stronger buildings, since bricks would collectively reinforce walls or foundations. Bricks were relatively easy to make and require very little skill to make, meaning that bricks can become a cheap yet strong alternative to building with sticks. Babylonians used sun-dried and kiln-fired bricks in buildings. Ziggurats and other structures were made from mud bricks.
Are you struggling to make pottery or transport goods? Well, we have an answer. This new type of technology is really innovative. What's its name, you may ask? It's called a wheel and axle. Some even say they work together as well as peanut butter and jelly, which has not been invented yet. Here, you could see a young man using a wheel in the wheelbarrow. He's using it to transport his goods such as wood. It's easier and faster to transport them.
What are its uses, you may ask? Well, around 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, the wheel developed first as a pottery wheel and then became more widely used for irrigation and milling. The axle allows for the wheel to become more practical to society. Around 1500 BCE, the Hittites took advantage of the wheel and axle for military purposes when they combined them with iron to form a carriage, more commonly known as the chariot. This allowed them to expand into much of modern-day Turkey, as they used the wheel and axle for transportation and military purposes rather than for farming and arts. Around 1,000 years later, the wheel and axle started to be used more vigorously to accomplish tasks with more ease. In classical Greece, the wheelbarrow developed as a labor-saving invention to make the transportations of goods easier, which is why the wealthy were mainly the ones who could afford it.
Trying to cook up a new mixtape? Boom, you need a pot. Need to cook food? Boom, you need a pot. Need to store food? Boom, you need a pot.
Over the course of human history, pots have been essential to human life. They helped to contribute to the emergence of the agricultural revolution. Because we now have something to easily store food rather than putting food on the floor, the shelf life of food is now longer and the food is now cleaner. Hunter and gathering groups realized that by farming, you could obtain a stable source of food and you no longer had to move to get food. Eventually, there's a surplus of food and more people can live in the same area. As more people move to an area, the surplus increases. This leads to early civilizations such as Mesopotamia and Egypt. Pots have more functions than storing food. In human history, the creation of pots leads to complex art expressions in later periods. Pots act as a canvas to paint on, and many archaeologists have found artwork in regions such as Mesopotamia and Egypt. Pots are also used as a so-called conduit for writing, especially for graves. This shows that pots are special in their own right.
Alright guys, dinner time. Let us eat.
You're being such a bad host.
Guys, I'm sorry. This is the yeast I could do.
Wheat, barley, legumes, vegetables. With the introduction of farming came the selective breeding of crops for their desired qualities. Crops like corn and wheat were bred to have increased yields for a larger food supply. In the Paleolithic period, hunters and gatherers primarily ate fruits, berries, and wild animal meat. It was only in the Neolithic period that vegetables became part of the human diet and were digestible by stomach. Vegetables like lettuce, peas, carrots were starting to become part of the human diet. In Asia, many Neolithic people around Vietnam began cultivating rice into rice paddies. Studies on the nitrogen-15 isotope in Neolithic settlements show that farmers were effective at land management in order to maximize crop yield in the long run. Domesticated animals would be used for their dung as fertilizer and meat as food.
If you don't want to look like a caveman, put on some clothes.
Oh, better.
Neolithic clothing was primarily made from animal hides and fur, since weaving textiles was not commonly used. Wood cloth and linen textiles were being produced on a small scale, but it was not available to everyone at that time. There's been evidence of loom weights dating back to 10,000 BCE, although from the remains of women, indicating that weaving was a task primarily reserved for women in these societies. People living in warmer climates typically weave clothing out of linen in order to keep themselves cool. People in colder climates typically used animal hides as clothing in order to stay warm. Shoes were insulated with tree bark, leaves, and fur, since the outside covering was constructed out of leather.
Check this stick out. It looks like an ordinary run-of-the-mill stick, right? Well, you're wrong. This stick is a new piece of sophisticated technology called the plow. Not every piece of land was created equal, and sometimes us farmers must use something special for our crops to grow faster and bigger. Using this plow allows me to dig deeper into soil and lets my plants access more nutrients.
One of the first forms of the plow was the ard, invented by the Assyrians and Egyptians in 16,000 BCE. It consisted of a horizontal wooden bar that was strapped to a horse or oxen's back. The user, however, could only use the plow in one line, and the blade would break frequently. The plow allowed farmers to gouge deeper in the soil, allowing for more access to nutrients. This also allowed crop yields to increase, since the increased access to nutrients favored the growth of crops. Mesopotamian farmers were able to cultivate a wider variety of crops besides wheat and barley, like apples, grapes, and figs. Plows also enabled farmers to create more sophisticated irrigation systems, allowing agriculture to become more intensive. In Egypt, the Hittites introduced iron, which Egyptians used on their plowed blades. Most plows required an animal to pull, especially typically a cattle or an ox, since soil is very hard to break.
You trying to throw away your AP World notes before the school ends. Boom, you need irrigation.
Irrigation is important in human history for many reasons. In Period 1, irrigation was used to control river flow in river valleys. In Mesopotamia, the Tigris and Euphrates were very unpredictable. Irrigation was used to regulate water flow, which greatly helped agricultural production. A world without irrigation would vastly set modern times back thousands of years, and the world as we know it would be much different. The irrigation of Period 1 will lead to innovations of irrigation, thus creating the canal system, which is a big part of early success of the Abbasid Caliphate.